Old age peels the body, not the soul.
There's a question many prefer to avoid, yet it quietly lives in the hearts of those over 60. What really happens to the soul of an elderly person when physical life comes to an end? It's not about fear or religious doubt. It's something deeper, an unease born from years of experiences, a life fully lived, and the increasingly tangible nearness of the final transition. And because it's such a delicate topic, many choose silence. But Edgar Cayce didn't back down. The sleeping prophet revealed truths few dared to hear, much less accept. Through visions and messages crossing the veil between life and death, he left clues about hidden realities of the soul. Stay until the end. We'll gather the main lessons of this video to help you better understand the spiritual journey of older adults. Imagine the clock's hand shaking on the living room wall, as if every second untied a secret knot inside the chest. Outside, the sun slowly sets, painting the sky in shades of copper, while your grandfather, sitting by the window, twists his loose wedding ring on his finger and sighs without hurry. He doesn't lament wrinkles or aches. What really stirs him is that feeling something greater is whispering just behind the everyday curtain. You notice a sparkle in his eyes, a mix of longing and wonder, like someone recalling an old dream and wanting to share it before the memory fades. It's in that moment, when silence almost becomes music, that the question speaks. Where does what we call self go when the body starts to slow down? I promise to guide you through this journey without jargon or unreachable theories. We'll talk like neighbors on the porch, exploring why Cayce saw elders as living libraries of energy, and how every silver strand of hair might hold clues about eternity. If at any point you feel a spark of recognition, pass that spark on. A simple share keeps this conversation alive. Cayce said the soul collects experiences like sewing colorful patches, forming a cloak that thickens as decades pass. Old age, then, isn't decay, but the moment this cloak fully reveals itself, filled with patterns finally seen. Think of Mrs. Lords, 77, watering ferns on her balcony. One afternoon, while adjusting a lazy leaf, she smelled rosemary, unmistakable, and in a flash remembered her childhood yard, running with her sister, now past. There was no rosemary nearby, but the memory came so vividly, Lords closed her eyes and swore she heard laughter among the flowers. For Cayce, this isn't hallucination. It's the spiritual memory breaking time's veil, reminding us love doesn't wash away in the rain of finitude. Another fascinating side is sensory expansion. As worldly duties lessen, consciousness, free from schedules and deadlines, tunes into invisible frequencies. Mr. Alcides, a retired sailor with calm eyes, said that while napping in his chair after lunch, he could distinguish colors in the fan's hum. Swirling indigo blue whirlpools spinning as the blades turned fast. He didn't seek an explanation. He just smiled, accepting it as a gentle message from the universe. Similar stories, gathered from coastal spiritist centers and countryside gatherings, form a mosaic supporting Cayce's idea. Aging fine-tunes internal antennas once muffled by the rush of life, yet no one passes decades unharmed. In the shadow of this awakening, the fear of disappearing pulses, not the fear of death itself, but that all lived moments might erase like chalk lines washed away by rain. Here, Cayce offers comfort. He compared earthly life to a long school day. The bell will inevitably ring, signaling a return home where lesson notebooks are lovingly reviewed, not punished. This metaphor dissolves anguish and lightens the heart of those afraid of the dark. When your grandfather talks about friends who've passed, ask what he imagines finding on the other side. You might discover the fear doesn't rule as much as we think. Let's also talk about the body, a fragile, precious machine. Many elders describe pains that feel like coded messages. Mrs. Rosalia endured arthritis in her fingers for decades. One night she dreamt of forgiving her estranged brother. Upon waking, her morning stiffness was surprisingly milder. Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidences often smell like purpose. Similar stories come up in clinics and neighborhood cafes, building a bridge between science and spirituality. Memory itself deserves reverence. How many times have you heard an older person repeat the same teenage story? For some, it sounds redundant. For Cayce, it's polish on gold. Every retelling reorganizes emotions, like rearranging old photos in a new album. A trauma shared with tenderness stops bleeding. A love remembered with gratitude feeds hope in the listener. Maybe that's why grandparents excel in turning pain into sweet advice, handing down maps where scars once were. As you read this, ask yourself, how long has it been since you visited an older relative just to listen without rushing? Between cups of coffee, a seemingly trivial story about a walk to the market can reveal lessons in resilience no bestseller teaches. If this little nudge resonates, a quiet thumbs up shows we're tuned to the same purpose. Cayce also spoke about the power of lucid dreams in old age. When eyes close, the elder walks corridors of light, meeting mentors, reviewing life plans, and charting new steps. In one such journey, a retired teacher was advised to teach again, this time to at-risk youth. He woke up determined, found a community center, and within months, math classes turned failing grades into bridges toward scholarships. How many lives change thanks to a dream that could have been dismissed as night nonsense? For Cayce, the dream world is the soul's lab, where ideas rehearse before taking the stage in waking life. Let's not ignore shadows, loneliness, degenerative diseases, emotional poverty. These all knock on the doors of those adding birthdays. Yet even these challenges can become spiritual fuel. When Mrs. Iris, widowed for 10 years, adopted a rescued dog, she turned her quiet apartment into an orchestra of quick paws and happy barks. She says since then, she dreams less of funerals and more of flowering fields. Cayce would agree. Love expressed in small gestures expands the aura, drawing healing vibrations. Before wrapping up this first part, remember each elder carries a collection of keys that can open doors still unimaginable. Sometimes they hide in simple phrases, said between sips of tea and sighs. If you've come this far, keep your promise. We'll explore vivid spiritual experiences shared by these timekeepers in the next chapters, see how memory talks to eternity, and why fear of death might turn into an ally in the search for meaning. Meanwhile, comment below about a memory of an elder that touched your life. Your stories light paths no scriptwriter could craft alone. And if you want to catch every future revelation, subscribe. Not out of obligation, but because the journey gains color when we travel together. If the first part showed how the soul expands when the body slows down, now we dive into spiritual experiences that arise in this fertile ground called old age. Many assume the years bring only limitations, but accounts say the opposite. When outer vision blurs, inner sight sharpens with surprising clarity. Take Mr. Joachim, a retired mechanic who spent his youth fixing noisy engines and swore he didn't believe in otherworldly things. At 79, a fever sent him to the hospital. Amid the haze of medication, he dreamed of a bright corridor where strangers in linen clothes called him by the nickname only his mother used. Days later, still recovering, he noticed the whole room smelled like lavender, the scent he recognized from his mother's apron. How to explain it? Joachim can't answer, but he no longer doubts something much bigger cares for invisible details. Similar cases repeat in countless variations, and calling them coincidence demands more faith than accepting them as clues. Edgar Cayce believed that as we age, the soul gains freedom to move through planes beyond everyday logic. It's like, after carrying heavy loads for decades, it slips through invisible cracks to breathe lighter air and returns bringing subtle messages. Mrs. Concession, 73, says she hears little bells during afternoon naps no one else notices. They announce surprise visits or important calls minutes later. She doesn't brag about this gift. She simply writes down each synchronicity in a floral notebook, like collecting rare petals. Another phenomenon is life review while awake. Don't confuse it with idle nostalgia. It's an intimate movie flashing sudden scenes that stitch past and present into one frame to draw meaning. Cayce explained this process organizes lessons, closing emotional loops still open. Imagine Mrs. Aida, 84, moved when remembering her father teaching her to ride a bike. That afternoon at the kitchen table, she realized she still carried guilt over selling her old Monarch bike during tough times. She shared her story with her granddaughter, cried, laughed, and felt immediate relief in the stubborn back pain she'd had for months. For Cayce, there's no coincidence. Emotion released, body eased. Heightened sensitivity also appears in connections with nature. How many grandparents suddenly say they talk to plants? Mr. Claudio, a retired bus driver, swears the lemon tree in his yard asks for pruning every time its branches stretch too far. It might sound like folklore, but look at the result. The orchard has never been so lush, and his grandson, inspired, decided to study tree bioacoustics. Cayce would smile. When a human tunes into subtle vibrations, the surroundings respond almost poetically. There are also near-death stories, where the boundary between dimensions becomes a thin, transparent film. Donna Estelita, who at 80 suffered a heart stoppage during surgery, shares how she floated above the table and overheard the medical team discussing the severity of her case. Then she crossed a golden field and met her husband, who had passed away 12 winters before. He handed her a sunflower and asked her to take care of their grandchildren before coming back. When she regained consciousness, she described details of the surgical room conversation, which the team confirmed. Experiences like this support Cayce's view. Death is a passage, not a wall. Maybe you think of someone dear who ages quietly, holding life experiences that could light up others' lives. Turn those memories into action. Pay a visit, record their stories, write letters asking about the best choices they've ever made. If this sounds like a good idea, leave a comment. Your initiative inspires other viewers and creates a quiet chain of care. Science has been looking at these stories with less skepticism and more curiosity. Research on post-death consciousness, near-death experiences, and neuroplasticity in old age is gaining ground at prestigious universities. Although many labs avoid Cayce's terminology, several admit there's something beyond the synapse that still escapes conventional measurement. It shouldn't be a battle between faith and microscope, but a conversation. After all, every deep question deserves answers in more than one language. By the way, a recent study at a Canadian university invited volunteers over 70 to meditate for 15 minutes a day. After 6 months, 9 out of 10 reported more lucid dreams, feeling a loving presence during the practice, and significant improvement in working memory. The group without meditation didn't show meaningful changes. It's preliminary data, sure, but it suggests that the aging brain responds with surprising plasticity when stimulated by simple practices. Cayce was already hinting at something like this nearly a century ago. Amid all this buzz, accumulated wisdom stands out. It's not just about remembering dates or recipes, but decoding subtle patterns of human behavior. Mrs. Helena, an old seamstress, can tell when her neighbor is sick just by the tone of her voice on the phone. She doesn't make a fuss. She prepares soup and leaves it at the door before the symptoms get worse. Perceptions sharpened over decades become silent service. Maybe that's why whole neighborhoods rally around one elderly person who knows things. Cayce said every act of kindness expands the aura field, creating glowing points visible to those who see with spiritual eyes. Elders, according to him, act like old lanterns lighting streets where electricity hasn't arrived yet. And us? What light do we spread around? It doesn't have to be a heroic act. Sometimes just listening without interrupting, offering a seat on the bus, or sending a message to someone who disappeared from social media is enough. Tiny sparks brighten corners that fear often darkens. As we move to the next part, where we'll look at how well-cultivated memory becomes a healing tool and how fear of death can turn into peace, invite a friend to watch this video today. Every story shared keeps an elder from going through their spiritual discoveries alone. Light grows when shared, and every experience told finds an echo in some heart ready to awaken. When night falls and the house quiets down, many elders find themselves at the table browsing through photos, not just because they miss the people in them, but because each image carries echoes of decisions that shaped their lives. Edgar Cayce described this habit of looking back as a kind of soul harvest. The clearer the details, the richer the spiritual fertilizer feeding the present. That's when memories stop being sepia portraits and become compasses. Donna Gabriela, for example, recalls the day she quit a stable job to start a homemade candy factory. At first, it seemed just a culinary adventure. Decades later, she sees that courage taught her grandchildren the value of trusting their instincts. When she tells this memory, she's not just sharing an episode, she's revealing the invisible architecture supporting each of us. Cayce said, every honestly retrieved memory dissolves pieces of fear lodged between the vertebrae of time. That's why he advised elders to tell their stories openly, even if they seem insignificant to hurried ears. The role of accumulated wisdom goes beyond words of advice. How many times have you seen a grandparent shake a stranger's hand and with that touch sense a hidden sadness? That intuitive reading doesn't come from nowhere. It grows from years of decoding micro-expressions, listening to silences, recognizing patterns of joy and pain. Cayce called this the literacy of human vibration. Therapists notice that older patients can predict mood changes in their grandchildren with precision that challenges conventional psychology. It's not magic, it's experience turned into sensitivity. In a time when apps promise to measure emotions by voice or heartbeat, maybe the greatest emotion detector remains the heart trained by a long life. Now we reach the point where many take a deep breath, fear of death. For Cayce, legitimate fear turns into clarity when we see the end as a natural extension of the journey, not an abyss. He suggested imagining death as a gateway anchored by 3 pillars: acceptance of the past, gratitude for the present, and trust in the unseen future. Elders who practice this vision report unexpected physical relief. Mr. Vicente, who struggled with chronic insomnia, began to picture his own goodbye, not as a sudden cut, but like changing clothes after a long, tiring day. Within weeks, he slept like a child. Maybe the explanation lies in neuroscience. Reducing anxiety frees rest hormones in the brain. Maybe it's something subtler. Inner peace resonates through the body. The important thing is to notice that when we face the topic head-on, without drama but with tenderness, it loses its power to paralyze. Some believe talking about death invites misfortune. Cayce disagreed. He said thoughts work like lanterns. They light the space they occupy, not create new shadows. Ignoring death doesn't stop it. Talking about it can add meaning. Think of little Sophia, 8 years old, asking her great-grandma if there's life after the last breath. The elder could have dodged the question. Instead, she shared a vivid dream of a lavender field where she met her own mother again. The result was twofold. The girl slept peacefully, and her great-grandma felt an old knot loosen in her chest. Stories like these prove that addressing the end with poetry strengthens both who's leaving and who's staying. There's another valuable lesson here: intergenerational exchange. When a young person listens without rush and an elder speaks without masks, a healing bridge forms benefiting both. Current studies show that homes encouraging time between grandparents and grandchildren have lower rates of depression at all ages. Cayce predicted this when he said, "Knowledge ages to become love." It's in this interaction that we learn to put urgencies in perspective. The grandpa watches his grandson anxiously waiting for a new phone and, with a calm smile, remembers happiness once fit inside a sock ball. He doesn't condemn technology, he just teaches balance. The grandson, hearing this, might understand that the rush of now doesn't have to swallow the simple joy of a sunset. Talking about memory also means forgiving. Many elders carry silent guilt, from family fights to regrets over missed chances. Cayce suggested release rituals, writing letters with no recipient, burying symbolic objects in the garden, or simply voicing forgiveness during a warm bath. Dona Nosa, after burning a copy of a lawsuit that had dragged on for 20 years, noticed a sweet smell where she expected acrid smoke. It could be pure paper chemistry. It could be a soul-breathing relief. After that, her migraine attacks lessened enough to surprise her doctor. Once again, science and spirit seem to dance in a choreography we don't fully understand yet. You might wonder how to apply all this if you're not in what's called the third age. Start by preserving stories. Record older people's voices, save letters, photograph objects with history. By doing this, you don't just honor memories, you build a mirror to reflect your own path. If this idea feels useful, consider leaving it in the comments. Your experiences might guide someone who feels lost between past and future right now. We're close to the end, but there's no final here, only continuation. Cayce saw life as a spiral. Each life expands the previous one. Each farewell plants a reunion. That way, death doesn't erase. It rewrites in a softer tone. Imagine a lit candle. When another candle touches it, the flame spreads without fading. Souls work the same way, multiplying light by touching others' consciousness. When an elder leaves, they leave flames burning in those they loved. And that goes beyond cemeteries, dates, and paperwork. If any part touched you, share it with someone who needs comfort. A simple message can be the breath that rekindles almost out embers in tired hearts. And if you're not part of this community yet, join us by clicking subscribe. Every new voice grows the chorus of those who believe life goes far beyond the biological clock. May the wisdom of those who came before remind us every day to live with kindness, leave without fear, and leave trails of light wherever our steps touch the ground.